Hello.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Did you have lunch? Did you get something to eat?
No, because I was in a rush. Eat sandwich later.
Just don't keel over.
No, I will not. Thank you for organizing this. It's a very
Well, I have a very simple one. All institutions should do just what it says on the tin. What you're supposed to do. This is what it says you're supposed to do. Sound is,
The sound's not.
yeah, I mean, it's controlled. We don't have to push anything.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Excellent, excellent. Well, it's good to see so many of you here. I am slightly wondering where all of you were at the event I moderated on plastic light fittings last week. But I'll let you off, I suppose. Well, look, without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to the European Ombudsman, Emily O'Reilly.
Thank you very much indeed. James, good afternoon, everybody, and you're all very welcome here. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to attend this important seminar. And I'd like in particular to welcome all of our speakers, including Commissioner Andriukaitis, and to thank James Chris for agreeing to moderate here today. I'd like to begin by giving some brief background to this event and to clarify its purpose and its scope. The biggest number of complaints that my office receives are about transparency, not just access to EU documents, but also the transparency of institution lobbying, revolving doors cases, the composition of Commission and other expert groups, essentially issues that concern how decisions are made at EU level and who or what influences those decisions. And because I have very strong investigation powers as European Ombudsman, my office is often approached by citizens, by civil society, and by business interests to try and get information on EU issues or to have complaints resolved that they haven't been able to get resolved themselves. So this was the context in which my investigation into aspects of lobbying by the tobacco industry of the European Commission arose. The NGO Corporate Europe Observatory made a complaint alleging that undisclosed meetings between the Commission and the tobacco industry had taken place during the passage of the Tobacco Products Directive a few years ago. The details of the case are on my website, but essentially what I found is that, yes, meetings had taken place as described, but they were undisclosed only in the sense that to find out about them, an access request under Regulation 1049 had to be made. The only DG that was proactively releasing details of such meetings was DG Health. The complainant alleged that the absence of proactivity in the rest of the Commission was in violation of Article 5.3 of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, to which the EU is a signatory and a strong supporter of. The purpose of Article 5.3 in the context of protecting public health through tobacco control is to limit tobacco industry interactions with government. It states, in setting and implementing their public health policies with respect to tobacco control, parties shall act to protect these policies from commercial and other vested interests of the tobacco industry in accordance with national law. The guidelines that flow from this article are based on 3 principles, the first of which reads, "There is a fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between the tobacco industry's interests and public health policy interest." As we know, 700,000 Europeans die every year from smoking, and as Article 168 of the EU treaties legally requires all EU institutions to ensure a high level of health protection, and as the WHO guidelines on Article 55.3 list the Ombudsman institution as one of the enforcement mechanisms, I of course take this issue very seriously. In brief, following my inquiry, I found that it was indeed maladministration that the Commission was not fully transparent. I recommended that all DGs should follow the proactive transparency policies of DG Health, as the interests of the industry, like most industries, span several sectors, and it is therefore, again like others, lobbies widely across the Commission. As we know, all tobacco-related issues are in the end health issues. The Commission has to date rejected my recommendation, stating that its transparency policy in this area is in line with the Convention guidelines, which are not, as the Commission states, binding. I, however, continue to take the view that the Commission's refusal to follow the example of DG Health fails to follow the Convention's direction that administrations have to act proactively in this regard, and the Commission has not yet made a convincing argument for its decision not to extend DG Health's practice across the rest of the Commission. And while lawyers may indeed disagree on the nature of appropriate implementing measures in a convention such as this, I still remain puzzled as to why the Commission chose to take the stance it did. An additional administrative burden could not be a sufficient reason for so doing. I should, of course, acknowledge that the Juncker Commission has set a new standard for transparency. Lobby meetings with commissioners, directors general and cabinet members are proactively published, and while that is a good start, little detail is not yet published unless 1049 requests are made. My inspection also discovered that meetings in the past, and presumably still, have taken place with legal services and with the Secretariat General, which are not proactively published. Meetings between Commission legal services and their tobacco industry counterparts are not always recognised as meetings in the context of lobbying, which they can be, an issue which I also dealt with in my recommendation and on which the Commission also disagreed. So that is what we are here to discuss. But before I hand over to James, I want to make a number of quick additional points. I am aware that the tobacco industry is unhappy at not being represented on the panel today. I can, of course, invite whoever I wish to take part in a seminar that I organise, but I did make a decision not to invite tobacco industry representatives, as that is how I interpret my obligations under the Convention. This is, however, a public event, and I did not exclude any interest group from taking part. The Convention concerns governments and public administrations, and while it seeks to limit interactions with the industry, it does not prevent them. The tobacco industry continues to be a major global industrial force, and as such, of course, cannot be ignored by governments as they seek to regulate and to make other decisions concerning industry generally and tobacco in particular. But I repeat, today's debate solely concerns the appropriate response of the EU institutions to a convention which it enthusiastically supported and continues to be a signatory to. Finally, I am also aware that the tobacco industry feels discriminated against and asserts that transparency rules should apply equally across all industries. The point, of course, is that the purpose of the Convention is precisely to discriminate against the tobacco industry. Decisions, therefore, to limit interactions are not arbitrary, but arise directly from the EU's decision to sign the Convention. So today is about the implementation of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control by the EU, and I again call on all EU institutions to implement the Convention fully and according to its guidelines. Thank you very much. And now, James, over to you.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our panelists today. To my left, we're very lucky to have Roberto Bertolini, Chief Scientist and WHO Representative to the EU. To my far right is Pascal Dietem. Sorry about the pronunciation, Pascal. I'm also going to struggle with the name of your NGO, Oxhormandi?
Yes.
Okay, super. Which is an NGO dedicated to tobacco control. And Pascal is also a founding member of the Framework Convention Alliance. So he was there at the beginning of the treaty that we've been discussing today. And of course, we also have Health Commissioner Vytenis Andriukaitis. And before we hand over to the Commissioner, there's just a couple of housekeeping things that we need to discuss. First of all, this is being web streamed. Second of all, to your left or right, you will find a small microphone. When we throw open the floor for questions, that is how you can make yourself heard. So please familiarize yourself with the system. Okay, well, look, without any further ado, and before we begin what is certain to be a lively debate, Commissioner, please.
Thank you. Madam Ombudsman, Ms. O'Reilly, ladies and gentlemen, once again, good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here today to discuss how to improve transparency in tobacco control policy. Thank you, Madam Ombudsman, for your kind invitation. First of all, allow me a general remark. A high level of health protection in all European Union policies and activities is enshrined in treaty, especially in Article 168 of the treaty. This article also foresees the adoption of measures, I quote, which have as their directive objective the protection of public health regarding tobacco and abuse of alcohol. Two things are directly enshrined in the treaty, tobacco and alcohol. Therefore, action on prevention should be the job of all the institutions and their members, whether at European or at member states level. I would like to say a few words now on my commitment to tobacco control and set out my thoughts regarding transparency and the tobacco industry. Let me first share some figures with you to set the scene. Tobacco consumption kills prematurely 700,000 Europeans every year, estimate. Many of us here in this room will have lost relatives or friends because of tobacco. Tobacco consumption causes a number of diseases, including cancer. As a medical doctor, I have seen for myself what tobacco does to people. It is a very painful picture. European Union countries spend over 25 billion euros every year to treat their citizens for diseases caused by tobacco. Approximately 1 in every 4 Europeans still smokes, 26% to be precise. And most smokers get hooked into nicotine addiction when they are teenagers. This is just for you to bear in mind all the human suffering and economic costs that tobacco represents. I quote one, I would like to stress one again. As tobacco industry presents cost for healthcare system. Naturally, as a health commissioner, my aim is to do everything in my power to improve the health and well-being of European citizens. My aim is to protect people from the harm that tobacco causes, to discourage tobacco consumption so as to improve people's health, to provide people with the right tools to make informed choices, and to discourage teenagers from taking up smoking. As a former health minister and member of the Lithuanian parliament for 6 consecutive mandates, I have devoted my career to tackling these important public health issues. Let us now look at the aim of the tobacco industry. The aim of the tobacco industry is to sell its products as much as possible, it's profit, to as many people as possible. Each and every new smoker is a welcome client for the tobacco industry. So our aims are not compatible. They are not reconcilable. Tobacco industry has one aim, we have absolutely different. This is why it is extremely important that we act to protect our health policy from the interest of the tobacco industry. So this is a very clear obligation enshrined in Article 5.3 of the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control. The European Union and each and every one of its member states has an important role to play as party to this convention. Ensuring that the principle of the convention are upheld is of utmost importance. We must also ensure that speedy ratification of the illicit trade protocol under this convention. At European level, I am proud to have been involved in the negotiations on the revised Tobacco Products Directive. This directive is an important milestone for health in Europe and will introduce some of the most ambitious provisions in the world in tobacco control. For instance, the directive prohibits cigarettes with characterizing flavors and introduces large health warnings, pictures and text, which you should be able to see on each and every new pack of cigarettes across the Union as from 20th of May. This is something that the tobacco industry has fought very hard against in the past and continues to fight. The legality of this directive is being questioned by the industry in court. The Commission worked under very significant lobbying pressure when preparing the proposal for a new tobacco products directive, and the Commission made considerable efforts to ensure that all decisions were taken without the undue influence of the industry. Let me assure you that the Commission remains fully committed to implementing Article 5.3 of the Framework Convention and fully shares your concerns about the need for transparency. The Commission takes very seriously the need to protect policymaking from undue influence. The Commission's ethical framework has been put in place to ensure that all services and staff behave with the utmost integrity. This includes staff regulations, a code of conduct for commissioners, and the code of good administrative behavior. There are also strict rules on access to documents and transparency in the Commission. Colleagues in DG Sante are now working to implement the Tobacco Products Directive while ensuring that these important principles of transparency are rigorously upheld. Article 5.3 is our guiding light when considering our relations with the tobacco industry. In line with Article 5.3 guidelines, we must limit any meetings or dealings with the tobacco industry to, I quote from the guidelines, what is absolutely essential to enable effective regulation of the tobacco industry and tobacco products. As such, my staff minimizes contacts with the industry to what is strictly necessary from a regulatory perspective only, and ensures that such contacts are done in a transparent manner. We have supplemented the Commission-wide transparency rules, considering our sensitive work on tobacco control policy. For this reason, all minutes of meetings with the industry are published on the DG Sante website. Personally, I am fully committed to ensuring a high level of human health protection in European Union policy. This commitment means that we must not accept pressure from the tobacco industry to stop or weaken our efforts on tobacco control. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. But, I mean, Commissioner, we heard there that Article 5.3 is the guiding light for the Commission. But we all know that your DG goes further on tobacco transparency than the rest of the Commission. Why did you make that decision?
I would like to say, from my point of view, our DG goes very well in the right direction, and we are in permanent contacts and communication with all DGs, informing what does it mean to follow Article 5.3 obligations. Of course, I know very well we all have room from improvements and maneuvers, no doubts. We will to discuss all issues, but our main goal is to disseminate such good practice, which is enshrined in our DG Sante framework, to all DGs and all services.
So Ideally, you would like the rest of the Commission to follow your DG's lead.
Yes, we do our best, and we are ready to continue this work, absolutely, no doubts. It is very good to have such debates like today, to see how to move forward, how to exchange our views, but mainstream is to have absolutely all our activities under rule of Article 0.53. We must avoid absolutely misleading informations and so on, and it's very good to see, to have permanent debates how to improve our transparency measures and how to make more progress in this direction.
And I mean, this is, I suppose, a very practical and an almost obvious question, but I mean, just simply publishing the minutes or the meetings online, I mean, does that impair the work of DG Sanco at all, or is it no burden?
No, yes, of course, we're ready to do our best, all meetings, and of course, also we must inform all member states to follow our examples, our obligations, our procedures, our rules, and of course, to avoid not transparent contacts with tobacco industry. Tobacco industry is industry which really produced products which are absolutely against public health interests, no doubt. We must say very openly, tobacco kills people. One simple message around all the world. And I have idea that in the future, maybe humanity will stop use such stupid thing like tobacco.
And I mean, finally, Commissioner, I mean, does DG Sanco get many requests for meetings from the tobacco lobby?
No. For my point, I am in office 1 year and 6 months now. We have absolutely strict, maybe they know our very strict position, because when I was chairman of Council of Health and we have debate about tobacco directive, you can't imagine what is pressing from tobacco industry lobbying, to delay, to be against, to propose many different things, to act between all 28 member states. And as you know, not all member states agreed to vote in favor on tobacco directive. It's reality.
I mean, that's an interesting point, and Roberto, I'd like to sort of come to you. I mean, in terms of member states, in terms of governments around the world, I mean, where is the pickup on the FCTC? Are there countries who are following the guidelines as intended?
Well, there are. I mean, I would say that there are a number of countries which are trying to do this very seriously. There are several ones in Europe, also among the BRICS. I mean, and I would say that the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which has, as you know, 180 parties at the moment, is one of the most accepted public health instruments that we have at the moment to fight against this deadly disease, deadly habit. So. There are several good examples, but of course, I mean, the attempts of the tobacco industry to continue pushing governments to go in different directions is a fact. And we have several, demonstrations on this. I mean, I prepared a few lines if you want, but I mean, basically, the tactic of the tobacco industry is evolved over time. I mean, they are not applying the same tactics they were applying many years ago. Because of the different legal framework in which we are operating at the moment, which is very important. So they are, one of the main things which has been underlined by the World No Tobacco Day of 2015, which actually was addressing this issue, is maneuvering to hijack the political and legislative process through mechanisms which have been mentioned also by the Commissioner now when the TPD was discussed, but also in the phase of implementation. I just want to mention that the Article 5.3, which is actually our reference in this discussion, it mentions, as was pointed out, that the requirement of this article apply to the setting and to the implementation of the policy. So the argument that I heard was raised about the behavior of the Commission as a whole referring to the fact that TPD has been approved now, so there is no much of an issue anymore, is not valid, because actually this article applies to to the implementation of the policies, and there are several aspects which need to be addressed at the moment of implementation.
I think we'll come to that implementation
Yeah.
or that influence on the implementation of policy in the course of this debate. But I mean, I'm just going to ask you a straight down the line question. I mean, in your opinion, is the European Commission, with the notable exception of Commissioner's department, is it living up to its responsibilities under the FCTC?
I think the Commissioner is playing a tremendously important leadership role in this business, Commissioner Andriukaitis. And I'm not saying that because he's here, because I've seen his actions during the years, when he was minister in Lithuania, when he was chairing the council, when he was really, his role in the approval of the TPD cannot be underlined, it cannot be downsized. I mean, he has been fundamental in these things. And he's trying to do this, to continue this activity within the DG Santé. I have no question about that. I speak on behalf of my organization, but also as a person, as a public health officer, which has been here in Brussels and following the activities of DG Santé for many years. So I think that's one thing. But on the other hand, I have to say that this principle is not, the type of approach is not clearly shared by other directorates. I cannot go into the details of that because I don't have all the elements, but it's clear that certain pressures from the tobacco industry on issues such as employment, such as, employment was one of the most important things. I mean, free of trade and other issues are really continuing, and not all the directorates are as sensitive as the directorate, the DG Santé, and not all commissioners are as sensitive as Commissioner Andriukaitis. So just to give you one example, I mean, this agreement with PMI, which is expiring in 2 months, and the Parliament expressed a clear opinion to go against this, but we all know that some parts of the Commission are pushing for a continuation of this agreement, which is a very negative thing, in my view, because it gives a legitimacy to the tobacco industry to interact with the Commission, to interact with governments. And I think this is one of the most important issues. The tobacco industry is trying to reshape their image and becoming a legitimate partner, which is a very dangerous move, in my opinion.
Thank you, Roberta. I mean, Pascal, you were involved at the sort of the birth of this convention. I mean, do you think that the Commission is living up to its requirements, or do you even think that maybe the guidelines should have been stricter, less open to different interpretations?
Well, I think the guidelines can be interpreted in ways which gives good transparency. But let me just come back on the history. I think without the type of transparency that is being advocated here, the FCTC would not exist. And what happened is that when Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland became Director General of WHO, she learned that WHO had been infiltrated by the tobacco industry. And rather than acting in a defensive manner, saying, well, this is going to be bad for the reputation of WHO, she said it openly, and she admitted it and says, well, we have to do something about it. She asked the executive board to designate an independent expert group to investigate the matter. She committed to publish all the results and follow the recommendation. And exactly what she did. And the result of this was that she decided to exclude the industry from the FCTC elaboration process, because she realized that the tobacco industry is part of the problem and is not part of the solution. But they could not be, they needed to be heard. So she formalized the way the industry was heard by giving each company, each entity, the possibility of making a 5-minute statement which was also written up. And this the whole process started with hearings from the industry. There were about hundreds of them heard. Each one, whether Philip Morris or a very tiny organization of growers, was given 5 minutes and made a statement, and that's all. And fortunately, the tobacco industry had little opportunity to interfere in the full process of negotiation and elaboration of the treaty. Nevertheless, they tried. At some stages, the negotiators had to exclude the public because the public was made 100% of tobacco representatives. And even in the elaboration of the illicit trade protocol, this was almost behind closed doors all the time because the public was made 100% of tobacco lobbyists who had very aggressive lobbying technique during the pauses at lunchtime, and they had to exclude them.
No, I'm sorry, Pascal, I'll just jump in because you did raise an interesting point, and we will definitely be getting on to some of the tactics that have been used in the past. But you mentioned the reputation of the WHO, and I can see, Commissioner, you want to say something on that.
I would like to say a little bit, a few words about our commission, college, and such Philip Morris agreement. I would like to say, personally, I don't know how it was practiced in previous commission. I don't know because I'm new. I started only 1 year and 6 months, or maybe 7 months. But I would like to say that our college is very proactive defending public health interest. And I have personal experience. We debated very much issues related to such a Philip Morris agreement. Of course, we bear in mind of legal previous situation. We are not living in some, in some very poor environment. We must follow all situations. Debates were very, very open debates, and of course, we present to European Parliament report, which was very open. And we stated generally all picture, described all picture about tracking and tracing regulations issues which are on the ground. And of course, the European Parliament welcomes this report, and the European Parliament decision was following such Commission report in which we enshrine main position. And today we are on the way to debate and to evaluate it, because we know very well that some court processes are ongoing. We must look all legal environment. I would like to say that for my point of view, I am very optimistic that this commission is very strong on defending public health interest. And of course, maybe some interpretations of rules, procedures, and so on. As I mentioned, we are ready to debate all issues and to see how to improve our transparency. But frankly speaking, I see good collegial attitude fighting against tobacco and fighting against lobbying and fighting against and of course raising questions on transparency. And as you know, transparency debates were interinstitutional, and today European Parliament debates their own transparency rules. And
but has this specific issue around the FCTC, has that been debated in the college or between departments? Has there been a discussion?
In all levels. And between departments, and DG Sante is I would like to say, DG Sante is very active to explain rules, procedures, to have at inter-service level, to also raise questions and to disseminate practice and to encourage colleagues from different DGs to follow such procedures. We are on a way, but I'm very happy about assessment, about statements, but but I am optimistic to see possibilities to improve our transparency capacities.
And I mean, on the transparency capacities in general, I mean, how important is that for the reputation of the European Commission?
Absolutely. From my point of view, must show absolutely our engagement to fight against tobacco lobbying. Absolutely, because it's question of reputation is number one. People do not believe on European institutions. It's very bad. We must say very openly, yes, our job is to encourage people to believe on European Union project, to believe on institutions, and then to move forward. It's absolutely crystal clear.
But I mean, we have a situation, and you know, we've already explained, Commissioner, that your department is, if you like, the highest standard of transparency in the terms of this issue. But we have a situation where I think it's fair to say that the Commission runs the risk of having quite a negative final report from the Ombudsman. I mean, that can't be good reputation.
No, but first of all, we all know very well, Ombudsman position is presented, and Commission is ready to assess, to debate, and to see how to move. Commission reply was done, and Ombudsman has possibilities to read such a reply. From our DG Santa, we are ready to continue debates, to see how to improve and how to change situation. We are very open.
Roberto and Pascal, in fact, I mean, how important is transparency from the WHO point of view? I mean, everyone says this word, it sounds nice, but I mean, how does it really protect public health? And I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, we go back to the tobacco industry tactic because, you know, this is transparency allow to show and to disclose all the different approaches which are being followed nowadays, I mean, to pursue the agenda of the tobacco industry. For instance, I mean, the tobacco industry is trying to manipulate the public opinion through an appearance of respectability. I mean, we are supporting programs from the youth, or we are making some projects of social responsibility. Transparency, I mean, showing who is behind these type of things is actually helping the public to understand. I came out today, I mean, by chance, by preparing this presentation, I came through a document of an Italian NGO, Transcrime, European Outlook on the Illicit Trade in Tobacco Products, which has been sponsored by Philip Morris, saying that they do it because it's, you know, it's nice to do it. And so I think this is something we need to disclose, because the conclusion of this report are necessarily influenced by the opinion and the point of view on this particular issue, but also in general terms. Who knows how many, I mean, indirect sponsorships in different domains take place because of the intervention of the tobacco industry. I mean, I can tell you what happened to me once. I mean, I was in a meeting in which we were discussing the relationship between science and policy. Believe me, science and policy. And somebody from, I found out when I was there that there was somebody from tobacco industry who sponsored that meeting, addressing the issue of science and policy. I mean, how can the tobacco industry speak on the issues of science and policy when they have cheated the public, they use scientists that they paid to say wrong things, and so on and so forth. So really, transparency allows this type of things to emerge. And we can make a number of examples. I mean, like diverting, for instance, science from one direction to another. I'll give you another example, personal experience also. I was in contact a long time ago with an important professor in Italy dealing with public health, which was known in every context. And this fellow was insisting very much in promoting the issue of indoor air contamination. I was working in environment and health at that time. And in indoor air, he was addressing the issue of allergens, molds, other microorganisms, by this dismissing the role of environmental tobacco smoke. So it's a very sophisticated technique. If we can disclose the relationship, the transparency of the sponsorship, of the influence of the tobacco industry, the dialogue, the meetings, because if we know that there's been a meeting discussing something related to the implementation of TPD, this is important to know, because it's important to give the public health community the instruments to react.
Thank you very much. And Pascal, I mean, does having who met who on a website really make a huge difference?
Well, let me just answer this question about why is it important to have transparency, not only in public health, but across all sectors of government, as a whole of government approach. It's because the industry excels in a technique where it pushes for a regulation in a department which has nothing to do with health and which apparently has nothing to do with their own business. Whether it is, they pushed in the 90s good epidemiological practice, which would have ruled out all studies showing that exposure to secondhand smoke is harmful. What is good governance, all those things, they love it. And they work with people who are a bit naive about this because they don't see the connection with tobacco. But once this is adopted, it acts as something that preempts the adoption of effective tobacco control measures. And this is the ultimate goal, and they engineer the process, and they have a kind of, I'm all for good governance, good regulation, but they have a toxic effect on this regulation because the hidden agenda is to use this as instrument to undermine public health and push their business. And this is why we need transparency, not in the domain of health, but across all sectors. And we need transparency at the same high level of standards.
Absolutely.
Pascal,
I agree with you.
I'm going to just ask you a very quick question, Commissioner, because I know you're going to have to leave us in 5 minutes, and I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask you 2 questions. But my very quick question is, are policymakers in the institutions aware of the tactics that tobacco lobbyists have used in the past?
Generally, yes, they are aware. Generally, yes. Because we have many questions on the agenda, but speaking about such Philip Morris tracking and tracing agreement, they were aware about tobacco industry's lobbying, and generally they were against. And I see at college level very good understanding of the situation.
Does anyone have a question for the Commissioner? Okay, well, we will start there and then go to the gentleman behind.
Yeah, hello, sorry, and thanks.
Oh, yes, please introduce yourself as well.
Yes, my name is Margrethe Auken. I'm a member of the European Parliament and the Envy Committee. And just a little question. I think it's quite easy to make it clear that the tobacco industry are the bad guys. But do you have the same transparency on all lobby meetings, also with the other industries, the other branches, pharmaceutical pesticides and so on, so it's easy for us
Absolutely.
to go in and look
No doubt.
what kind of meetings have been there.
Absolutely, no doubts. Please look at my website, on my meetings, on my minutes. Absolutely, it's a crystal clear position. I was in national parliament. I did the same. I was Minister of Health. I did the same. I was in different international bodies. I do the same. Absolutely, all because. Pesticides industry, you answered me about endocrine disruptors, about I think only, huh?
Sorry, I could trace it afterwards.
Yeah, but my question is, we must be absolutely transparent, no doubts. Because otherwise, I see very dangerous tendency to create some conspiracy theories. And to show that industry is something international monster who is ready to manipulate, to implement. And transparency helps to fight against conspiracy theory.
And I would like to also come back to you once perhaps the Commissioner has gone, just to ask what the Environment Committee itself is doing on this issue. I think that would be interesting. And yes, you, sir, please go ahead. And I'm told to say that you need to press the green button on the microphone.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
No.
Pressed. I'll speak up. My name is Jorgo Riss. I work with the Alliance for Lobbying Transparency, Alta EU. My question to you, Commissioner, is I'm very impressed by the case that you make for transparency vis-à-vis the tobacco industry for your DG. You clearly said that you think the whole Commission should follow that model. What will you do to make that happen? Will you sit down with President Juncker or Vice President Timmermans, and how will you get them to make sure that the others adopt that standard? Because I agree with you, everybody should follow your lead on this, and the Commission overall looks bad by not doing that.
Absolutely. I do what you said. I am debating those issues with my commissioners, with my vice presidents. Of course, you know, we will see possibilities to meet each other to raise those questions. But I will do the same because only one way to explain, to debate, to raise those questions, to see how to improve, how to change our rules, how to deepen transparency issues. Because I believe that this commission would be good, with excellent example of excellent transparency in all issues, and it's no doubt.
Okay, well, listen, I'm terribly sorry, but the Commissioner is going to have to make a move, but he will be replaced on the panel, and again, forgive my terrible pronunciation, by his head of cabinet, Arunas Vincianos? Vinciunas, very close, right? So, would you please join me in thanking the Commissioner? Now, I noticed that we had two hands up in the air. There's the gentleman there and the lady at the back. So let's begin with you, sir. Please stand up, introduce yourself and your organisation.
Thank you.
I'm Ronan Barry, and I'm here representing today the European Association of Cigarette Manufacturers. And there's a point that I'd like the panel to address, which I picked up when listening to the discussions. I seem to hear two distinct and opposite concepts being discussed. One is transparency, which we support, and we support the application of transparency principles to all interest groups engaged with the Commission. But the other concept that I hear in the discussion is not transparency, it is exclusion. And I could make the point that, you know, when we asked to participate on today's panel, we were told that we couldn't because of Article 5.3. I don't see that as an application of the transparency principle. What could be more transparent than the industry, you know, expressing itself in public, in front of all of the journalists, and I understand it's being web streamed. So you couldn't get more transparent than that. I see instead that the refusal of the industry's request to participate is an application of exclusion, not transparency.
So what's your question?
My question is, if you just give me a moment, my question, I'm just wondering, what is the concern? What is the concern? Are people concerned that my powers of persuasion are so supernatural that I can subvert the will and the good judgment of politicians? Are you afraid that if I speak for too long, the Commissioner will suddenly become a promoter of tobacco products? Or are you concerned that the arguments that the industry will advance have some validity, and that's behind the...
Okay, well, we'll take that question now. So why should we be so worried about tobacco lobbyists? I mean, are their powers so supernatural?
Well, I think we never exclude somebody with pleasure, you know. I think if the tobacco industry was excluded, it was after that all other attempts to deal with it failed and were counterproductive, were delaying the process, were sort of distorting the information channel. And therefore, reluctantly, there was no other way but to contain them within a channel of communication which is very highly controlled. Otherwise, their effect is toxic on the process.
Ernest, would you agree with that or disagree with that evaluation? I mean, are you worried about the powers of this gentleman's persuasion?
No, not at all. They could not convince us in the negotiations on TPD and will not convince us in the future.
Okay. And Roberta, do you have anything you wish to add?
Yes, I wish to add only one point. I mean, not really responding to this comment, but simply as a general statement. I mean, I think there's nothing to discuss with the tobacco industry. I mean, there is nothing we have to agree or disagree. I mean, we are in two different fronts. We have an industry which produces a substance which kills half of its producers, of its users, which has no added value in my view, and you know, they simply have to be, you know, is defeated in a sense. I mean, we would like that this tobacco habit finishes. So there's nothing to discuss. What should we agree on? I mean, there's nothing to be debated. I mean, we want transparency because we want that any contact they undertake with the political representatives at any level is clearly disclosed, so we know what is happening, in order to help contrasting these further attempts to jeopardize the health and the well-being and of the population in the world. So that's simple as this.
But I think it's worth also pointing out. Okay, but quickly, please, Pascal.
Well, there was also something that is fundamentally lacking when discussing with the tobacco industry, and history has constantly demonstrated it, and I've done a lot of research in internal tobacco documents, and in order to discuss with somebody, you need a minimum of trust. And this is what is lacking with the tobacco industry.
Okay, I'm going to allow the gentleman to come back quickly. People just don't trust you.
I think that's profoundly unfair, but there's a serious point, which is this. It is the role of politicians, of decision makers, to choose between competing arguments. And either we believe that they are capable of doing that, or we don't. And it seems to me that if people are saying that decision makers' access to one side of an argument must be restricted or even denied completely, I think that's a profoundly incorrect way of looking at things. I think so. From my perspective, what do you feel is missing in terms of how politicians are making decisions that justifies the exclusion of a side of the argument from their decision-making process?
I mean, I think that, you know, it's similar to the question you mentioned before, and it's worth remembering we're not talking about the product. We're talking about a UN decision, a UN treaty, which has been made. So, I mean, if this decision has been, the real discussion here is the Commission doing what it's meant to do under its obligations on the treaty?
Interestingly, I read recently, I think in the context of this discussion, I think it was Politico asked the FCTC, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control Secretariat, whether or not FCTC Article 5.3 is designed to exclude the industry viewpoint. And the answer, as reported, was that FCTC, or Article 5.3, is not about who gets to talk. It is about transparency. And as I say, we support transparency, but we do not support exclusion.
Okay. Well, you made your point. Thank you very much. You're going to leave in 5 minutes. Okay. Well, look, I'm terribly sorry to the person who had her hand up, but we'll just go to Margarita. And if you could just tell us briefly what the Environment Committee is doing in terms of this issue.
Well, you know, this is a political body, and we are divided between political groups. I'm coming from the Green Group, probably the most pushing for transparency for years. And we have managed in the Parliament to get insisted on lobby, a true lobby register. But the problem is that we cannot get the Commission, and that's sorry to say, to have an equal lobby register. And for instance, they want to exclude lawyers. Just to tell you what we're up against. You know, lawyers are not lobbyists in the definition of what a lobbyist is. And it's also difficult to find out what's going on at the lower level, because suddenly we can see that here has been, they have been there We can smell them, we can read them, even if they were not visible at the top level. That was a little issue I had with the endocrine disruptors, where we even had, the Parliament is quite clear here, but we even had the court on our side. And still, you know, the Commission just continue their work that was on because the other issues are more difficult. Tobacco is not that difficult because you know most people know it's dangerous. But what about the other things? There you have both sides, and there I think we still. And I think the majority in Parliament they also call for a strengthening of the 1049. Although the Commission and the Council probably worse the Council, that they wanted to get rid of 1049. They wanted to get rid of 1049. So we have a battle going on among the institutions, but of course also within the Parliament because we are politically divided.
I mean, as we're talking about the committee, and I'll give you a chance to come back if you wish, Arunas, I mean, Mr. Lavia, who was going to be here today but couldn't make it, sadly, did send us some information, and he said that, in his opinion, the FCTC is itself a piece of binding international law, so that the guidelines that accompany it and elaborate on how to implement the principles enshrined in the law should therefore be considered to have a de facto binding character as well. So, I mean, that's his view. I think it's the committee's view. Am I right in saying that? Absolutely. And I mean, he also said, which, you know, my eye was drawn to, that members of the European Parliament have reported free e-cigarettes delivered to their letterboxes, unsolicited tobacco lobbyists turning up in their offices, numerous invitations to drinks, so it's not all bad news, dinners and cocktail events, targeted social media and email campaigns, and various other bits and pieces. I mean, has that ever happened to you?
Well, you know, they don't waste their time. As the Commissioner said himself, he doesn't have meetings with the tobacco lobby. They might have with the others. And they are not addressing the Greens so very much. You know, that would be a waste of time. But for sure, we can also trace their amendments. You know, sometimes we can even see how they have copy-pasted suggestions of amendments, which of course it's not a criminality. But it's very bad if you cannot see this meeting has been there. And we try, and I don't know how much we have Lavia behind us there, not only to have you know, names, but who is financing and what is the position paper. Because you also need to have the position paper in order to be able to follow what's going on here. And that is, you can see when they try to exclude, for instance, lawyers, then we are in a not a very favorable position.
Well, I think the Ombudsman's recommendation explicitly says that this should include lawyers. Yeah. Okay, there's a very patient lady at the back who had her hand up. There she is. Yes, please introduce yourself, press the green button, and ask your question.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Right. I'm right here. I'm not going to stand because I will topple over a lot of other things. I just had a question for the Commissioner now for Aruna since he left. We're talking a lot about the Tobacco Products Directive, and we all know the scandal that enveloped part of that directive when it came around. So I'm wondering, given how important that piece of legislation is for the EU, I'm just right here, why is the implementation so messy? Why is everything done so last minute? We're 3 weeks before the deadline. You know, we have, 20 countries that haven't even transposed it. But, you know, that's not your problem in a way because you cannot control your member states. But, you know, the Commission still has 3 implementing acts that have to come forward. Why is that done so last minute? Is there a problem of resources in DG Sante?
And sorry,
why?
could you also just introduce yourself
Yeah,
and who
sorry.
you work
I'm
for?
Carmen Palm from Politico, healthcare reporter of Politico. Thanks.
Thanks, Carmen, for the questions. Well, on the implementation by the member states, it's pretty simple from the experience in a previous life as I have. So I can only just reflect what was happening usually, and it is happening in all negotiations, that the people who negotiate do not work with the people who implement. And the implementation only starts when the negotiations are over, then the people get the file and they start thinking, oh, well, what are we going to do? So that's why they are late. Hopefully most of them will not be late by the May 20th, But if some, as Commissioner said yesterday in the Parliament, May 21st, we start infringement procedures. So let's see. On the Commission, we are not late. We are on time on all the implementing acts. These which are left have not really have no major influence towards the obligations for member states. They will be basically in coming few days adopted. And what will be left for us is a track and tracing implementing act, which is in the legislation to be adopted by 2017, I think, if I remember correctly, and the entry into force 2019. Okay. But we'll be on time.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Yes, you, madam. Please press the green button and introduce yourself.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. My name is Marta Sienkiewicz. I'm a Blue Book trainee at JRC, Joint Research Center of the European Commission. I was actually wondering, when we talk about transparency, how far do we define transparency? The gentleman over here mentioned I think, listening to two sides of the story. So I'm thinking, to what extent do we ensure that the evidence that is being presented to the Commission and or at any stage of the decision-making process, that the evidence is being transparent, meaning that the research reports are being available, that the methodologies are clearly available to the public.
So how far should this FCTC transparency go, Roberta? I mean, do we need everything to be transparent, everything out in the open, every step of the decision-making process?
Well, I think given the delicacy of the issue and the power of the tobacco industry to interfere on all the different steps, I think, yes, that should be a general policy that we have to pursue. I just want to mention, I mean, when we talk about this particular subject in respect to the evidence, the scientific evidence on the impacts and so on and so forth, there's not much to be discovered. I mean, we have really all the evidence in place with respect to the impacts, the role of the tobacco in killing people, on cardiovascular diseases, in cancer and other things. So it's really more a matter of what is the most effective policy to reduce tobacco consumption prevalence in the public, which is not an issue that we have to discuss with the tobacco industry, of course, because they will not be very happy with this discussion. So I think, in any way, with respect to the question, I think yes. I mean, I strongly believe that the evidence at all level would help a lot. Sorry, the transparency at all level would help a lot in building up the case for those aspects which are still needs to be tackled.
I think it may be worth just reminding ourselves of exactly what the Framework Convention says. I mean, the important part, if you like, is parties shall act to protect public health policies from the commercial interests of the tobacco industry. Pascal, what are your thoughts?
Well, first, in terms of evidence, there are with public health implication of smoking, the evidence is divided in two parts: the scientific evidence and the tobacco industry's evidence, and they don't overlap. For example, a study was made into how could we explain that so many studies show that exposure to second-hand smoke is not harmful. And this was studied, and a lot of variables were put into a complicated model, and the only one that came as the real explanatory variable is whether the study was funded by the tobacco industry or not. So listen to the evidence provided by the tobacco industry doesn't bring you anything, just confuses the issue. So this is why we stopped listening to their evidence. They keep producing it. They keep paying corrupt scientists who produce studies on demand, producing the results they want. But, now we know, and it's been amply documented, this has not real value. Now, concerning transparency, transparency is only one part of the 5.3 rules. There is a lot of rules which, by the way, do not exclude the industry, but only regulate very strictly how you deal with the industry in a way which is just what is strictly necessary.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Aruna, can policy making, though, be entirely transparent? Should it be?
That's a very difficult question, really, to answer. Well, there are different processes. I mean, but to me, it's impossible to make it entirely transparent because anyway, there are negotiations you can deal. You cannot disclose what are you doing with even between the council and parliament when they discuss. It's not good to go with an open position and to be basically already prepared to defeat, because then you can give the arguments to the other side. So that's one thing. But here what we are talking is not that one, not the general transparency. Also, but Commission has proposed to the institutions a deal on transparency. That's what we want really to them to sign up, and first of all the Parliament.
And this is for consultation on the mandatory transparency register.
Yeah. At least to start from there, where we had a TPD being negotiated, we had the Philip Morris case lobbying against the TPD. I remember it was like that sick. And the other thing, if I may, just to allude to the industry, a simple example of trust. So if the MEPs are not telling when they are visiting tobacco factories, the industry can simply make it public. Who, when, is being invited by them to visit to see what they are doing.
Any more questions from the floor? Yes, you, sir. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's Brian Ward from the European Respiratory Society. I just want to build on what Pascal said there about the FCTC and exclusion. I mean, it was mentioned earlier that there was some sort of confusion between the FCTC and the Ombudsman. I see no confusion. The guidelines are very clear in it's to limit the interaction, and I think that's what we see today. There's no exclusion of anyone, but a certain sector has to be limited, as you said, in line with a UN decision that 180 governments have signed up to, and they're the procedures we're under unless they want to change the treaty. And I think that there's no debate there on that topic. My question is for the Ombudsman. What are the next steps in terms of, you've delivered your opinion, there's been a reaction. Just if you could outline, how does the trajectory go? What are the other steps available to you in negotiation with the institutions to help them fulfill their mandate, or to help them to fulfill their obligation under the FCTC? Thanks.
Well, it's a relatively rare event that an ombudsman recommendation is rejected. At the moment, we have a batting average of 90%, so that falls into the 10%. And I've said it a few times, and I've said it again here. I was actually quite surprised at why they did reject it. I mean, they had the usual legal stuff about, well, our lawyers interpret it differently to your investigators and all that, but which I didn't really accept. I accept there might have been a different interpretation, but I think this convention is very much also about the spirit of the piece, but also, leaving aside the spirit, it directs the signatory parties to be proactive. Don't just sit passively and do the bare minimum, but to see what else you can do. So I was surprised by it. I was surprised by it almost from a tactical point of view from the Commission, because I didn't see what the loss was going to be. Because theoretically and legally, a lot of the meetings that they were not putting proactively online, they could be accessed at some point under 1049. So it wasn't as if they were being required to release information that would otherwise not be in the public domain at some point. And they're also leaving themselves open to the kind of criticism that has been generated by the refusal to do so. And I was also surprised in the context of the fact that this commission has put transparency up there as a big badge in relation to how it conducts its business and how it wants to be judged. So, to put it crudely, I thought this was an easy win for the commission, and it didn't move on that. Now, I was on a platform with the commissioner, the health commissioner, some weeks ago, and he expressed the views very much in line with what you've heard today. Obviously, he is a member of the College of the Commission and all of that. He has to accept decisions that they make. But I think he was saying very clearly today that he's going to try and push it because he accepts the correctness of my position. And he's going to take steps to do that. I mean, the ultimate thing I could do, if you like, is to make a report to Parliament. But I think that should be an option that is very rarely used by an ombudsman because it means that nothing else has worked. And I'm hoping that a combination of the people who are coming out in support, Parliament is supporting it, the Envy Committee, the Commissioner, that will cause the Commission to act. Could I just say to Ronan there, and an awful lot of Irish voices here, actually, I notice. And I mean, as I've said, I've been very open. I made a decision because, as far as I'm concerned, my interpretation of the convention and my role in it is to, yes, give you a voice, which you've had, but not to have you as a speaker. And a lot of the arguments that you make, that this is not about transparency, it's about exclusion, well, in a sense, once the EU signed up to the convention, that debate was over to some degree because the UN and the WHO decided to take that tack, and the EU decided to accept it. Now, obviously, in its implementation, with 5.3, there are differences, particularly in relation to my recommendation, but as far as I'm concerned, what I have decided to do today is in line with what I am obliged to do as an EU body under the convention.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Olivier? So, yeah. It's the hidden microphones. Here we go.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yes, indeed, my organization was the complainant in the case, and maybe I have one comment and then a question to DG Sante. So the comment was simply to reiterate that what sparked our complaint was to see that there were a lot of meetings of the tobacco industry and its lobbyists with the European Commission, not with DG Sante, but with other DGs, and that those meetings were not disclosed proactively as they should be. That was in the time of the decision-making on the Tobacco Product Directive.
Could you just say which organization you're from, please?
From Corporate Europe Observatory, yeah, Olivier Hoedeman. So that is what sparked the complaint. We saw that tobacco industry lobbying was actually mainly focusing on other DGs than DG Sante because the doors there are less wide open, I guess. And that is also something that seems to be still the case today. If the recent Freedom of Information request we have submitted show tobacco industry lobbying focusing heavily on DG Trade, on DG Grow, and on the officials involved in the better regulation agenda of the Commission. And that just undermines why the transparency has to cover the rest of the European Commission, even more importantly than DG Sante, that already does a very good job. So again, we're also very surprised with the rejection of the Commission. It does not add up. It's very unconvincing. My question would be to DG Sante on the review of the lobby register. You referred to it before, and you referred to the leaked lobbying strategy documents of Philip Morris that really give a unique insight into just how comprehensive, but also how deceptive some of that tobacco industry lobbying is. The use of third-party strategies to have others speak on behalf of the tobacco industry without the actual industry being visible. Would you not think there is a big opportunity in the review of the lobby transparency register, not just to make it mandatory, but also to broaden what has to be disclosed so these tactics become more visible? And then I'm thinking specifically, for example, organizations receiving tobacco industry funding and being sponsored, think tanks, for example, that they should disclose that.
Well, the question is wider than my remit, actually. But I would say the first step would be good if the other institutions would sign what we have proposed. That's still not the fact. And then expanding it, well, let's see for the future.
I mean, Roberto, how far could we, speaking hypothetically, how far could we extend the FCTC? Is that a possibility?
In which sense?
Well, I mean, Olivier was talking about how, you know, there would be a necessity to disclose third-party funding, you know, more extreme transparency measures, if you like. I mean, is that something that we should be pushing for?
Well, I think that for what regards the implementation of the overall, you know, the FCTC as such, and I think we need to make sure that all the sector of governments, authorities at different levels, also international, national, and also the local level, actually adhere to the principles of 5.3 in full. So I think that is absolutely necessary. Whether this type of approach, sorry?
But they don't. I mean, all the countries which have signed up. I mean, not every country does adhere to these standards.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and this is actually what we are trying to do when working with member states. We have, you know, relationship with all the member states. You know, usually, and this is the problem, but we have a relationship only with the ministers of health. So they are the converted normally, not all the cases, but normally they are the converted. So it's difficult for us to interact with other sectors of the government because we don't. Our constituency is the ministries of health, so we have to relate to them. You have no, let's say, authority to relate directly to the Prime Minister or to the Minister of Trade or Transport. We try to do it because we follow the principles of Article 168 of the European Union. It is health in other policies, and we try to look at the involvement of other sectors in policies which are influencing health. But nevertheless, this is our first, level of interaction. I want to say also that the FCTC is a sort of a model, in my view, for other areas where we do not have an international treaty of the same value, but we have interference of vested interest in public health policies. I mean, I'm thinking about, I don't know, the sugar and nutrition and alcohol and other areas. So I think by enforcing the principle of transparency in the FCTC implementation, we are also constituted a sort of a model, a first case, which could become hopefully practice more extensively used for all the other issues of concern for public health. And Margareta was mentioning before some issues like endocrine disruptors or others. We can make a number of examples on these, which would be very useful to have transparency on the intervention of certain vested interest in the decision-making process at the EU and also at the national level.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Pascal, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you were involved in this from the beginning. I mean, it was signed in 2005. If it's going to be a model, I mean, doesn't it have to be a model which the signatories follow?
Well, it is. Let's make it a model. It's a model in the process of being made. It's still a treaty which is in infancy. Implementation now is the issue. Some countries are fairly advanced in implementation, like Australia with plain packaging and other countries, although they have a lot of goodwill, are lagging behind. And in many cases, when you look carefully at the causes of this lagging behind, that's the tobacco industry interfering. And that's why Article 5.3 is one of the key articles for a good implementation of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. So let's have this implemented. And once it could become a model, but this is a separate issue, and I don't know.
It sounds to me, Onkens, that this is almost a chance for the European Union to become a global leader if it takes it. An example, or to use the Commissioner's word, a guiding light.
Yeah, the EU member states have to ratify it first. Let's push for that all together, and then to become it. The protocol itself. So to become it really effective tool, and then we can move on.
But surely someone has to take the first step. Pascal?
First step for us to
It's done.
It's done.
First step is already there.
Yes.
Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? A lot of questions. We'll come to you last because you've had a couple of goes. The lady in the glasses, the lady over there, and then we'll back to Mr. Roney.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Nina Renshaw from the European Public Health Alliance. I think the points that have been raised by Pascal and just by Corporate Europe Observatory are fascinating and illustrates the need to implement the FCTC across all directorates of the European Commission and all of the institutions. And that's because what we're seeing, what many of us have noticed over the last several years, maybe even going past decades, is where the tobacco industry and their lobbying tactics are excluded explicitly from health policy, and that's done very well. They're actually targeting how European decisions and how European policies are reached. For example, by going after the better regulation agenda, for example, by looking at regulatory cooperation and investor-to-state dispute settlements within the TTIP negotiations. So for that reason, it is absolutely fundamental to also exclude these lobbyists who are trying to change the rules of the entire game from the discussions, especially around TTIP and especially around better regulation, and that applies across the board.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, is there a question as well? Is that more of a, because it's an interesting statement.
How the panel would respond in their experience. They observe the same trends.
Pascal, do you observe the same trends?
To-
The moving, the sort of the, if you can't get through on the health department, you go through DG Trade, you go through a different, sort of a diffusion of the lobbying effort.
Well, I think this is the constant tactic of the industry. One of the favorite channels was the customs department, with which they have privileged relationship, and they use that to undermine policy of departments related, finance, budget, and we see it everywhere. So clearly there's a need for protection. In fact, the industry is very good at taking advantage of the fact that ministries work like compartments with not much communication. But I had a very good experience in Africa where we had around the table people from all the different ministries, and it was the first time they talked, and they were extremely surprised about the degree of agreement they could achieve when the tobacco industry was not there.
Okay, thank you. And Roberto, the World Health Organization, the UN, in your experience, have you sort of seen if one door's closed, the industry goes round another door?
Yeah, I think it's actually more complicated than that. It's not simply acting through governments at different levels of the different departments. It's also using other tools, like, for instance, in a relationship with the media through indirect channels, exaggerating the economic importance of the industry, for instance, with respect to a single country. Or, one which is very intimidating for poor country, particularly the threat to open a litigation or a threat of a litigation that for some small countries or developing countries can be a very big problem. So that's another possible example. Or also, using support groups like free smokers, something like that. I have a quote of a document of PMI in 1997, which says, sometimes we will need to speak as independent scientists, sometimes scientific groups and businessmen, at other times we will talk as the industry, and finally we will speak as a smoker. So different tactics which are used. So that's the reason why we have to be vigilant, and we have to keep an open eye to all these different channels, and also to the hidden influence of the industry in sectors like media, for instance, that we don't know much.
Okay, the lady over there, yes, please introduce yourself and ask your question. It's sort of a Star Trek type situation.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, Sophie Petitjean, I'm a freelance journalist. I have several questions regarding the PMI agreement. First, how far is the DG Santé involved in the reflection process? And can you ensure us that the transparency criteria are respected, which means that the Commission has never met PMI about that, as the negotiation hasn't started yet. And my last question concerns the tracking and tracing system. If I'm right, I think the Secretariat of the FCTC said that the current system, the Codentify system, is in contradiction with the protocol. I don't remember very well what are the plans of the Commission, if there was an implementing act, or if it's the new agreement with PMI which is supposed to deal with this question, but I'm interested to get your point of view on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Well, on the first, DG, when there was an evaluation of the PMI agreement, the DG Santé was extensively consulted, and you can see from the report, I think you can recognize our input there in the document. On the meeting with PMI, I'm sorry, I did not understand. The Commissioner never met and will never meet an industry, tobacco industry, neither his cabinet. So, no. Well, the next question really was this, what to do with the expiring agreement. There will be a discussion in college at some point. There is time until July 9. I hope, and I'm pretty sure that the college will respect the Parliament's view on that. On track and tracing, there is no current system as such. There is an industry system which does track and tracing, and the current, the new European system is our obligation to do it. And as I said before, it will be in force May 20, 2019, as it is inscribed in the directive.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. Look, I suppose I've commented already on this theme which I see coming out, which is that one side of a debate should monopolise the inputs that are given to politicians before they make decisions, and I find that quite insidious. But I'd like to, I suppose, point to a practical example of why it's wrong to say that public health policy is better served if the industry is put in some solitary confinement somewhere where they can't be heard. And the practical example I want to draw your attention to is with the Tobacco Products Directive. It is true, as was pointed out before, that that companies have launched a challenge to the legality of the directive, but it's also true that companies are planning and preparing to comply in 17 working days' time. And we have written volumes of letters to DG Santé and to governments to say, please transpose the TPD as quickly as possible so that we establish legal certainty. The TPD was adopted 2 years ago. We are 17 working days to the industry's compliance deadline, and as we've heard from Commissioner Vinciunas earlier, only a handful of member states have transposed it. We wanted to highlight the complexities and the need for early transposition for the past years. Nobody wanted to hear us, and now we're in this situation of having legal uncertainty 2 weeks before the deadline because nobody wanted to hear us.
Okay. So just again, was there a question, Mayor?
Yeah, I think there is a question. I mean, do you accept that, you know, do you accept in hindsight that it would have been better, had the industry been listened to, had the industry's emphasis on the need for early implementing acts? They came out in October last year, which was not timely. Early implementing acts and early transposition by member states. Had that point of view expressed by the industry been embraced and taken seriously, we might have a more orderly, might have had a more orderly implementation.
I mean, would you like to respond to that? And I have a question for you.
Very short answer. I think industry could have made a big effort to lobby member states to transpose the directive as soon as possible, as it was adopted.
Why do you think the industry has such a bad reputation?
I think the industry's reputation, I think the reputation as you would perceive it to be listening to this debate is that it's a bad reputation. But I think, as I said, this debate has been quite one-sided. I mean, I always thought that tobacco lobbyists had a particularly bad reputation. To be honest, if you listen to this debate, but there are a lot of stakeholders that say, look, we need to understand your point of view as well. We need our decisions to be balanced. We may not agree with what you say. We may reject your argument, but we want to know what it is so that we take better decisions. That is a view that prevails in lots of places, in lots of kind of, you know, amongst lots of groupings of stakeholders. It's just that point of view has not been expressed except by me in this room. But I can't emphasize it strongly enough that a lot of people who make decisions say, we might disagree with your argument, we might reject it, but we still want to know what it is.
Okay. But don't you just tell them anyway?
Well, very difficult to tell them if they feel that what transparency really means is exclusion, because we do hear from people sometimes who listen to the misrepresentation of Article 5.3 of the FCTC. They hear it misrepresented, and they mistakenly understand that they cannot meet with us and listen to us and engage with us and argue with us. This is a kind of a perception that we have to combat. As I say, it's not a universal misperception, but it does exist.
Okay, thank you. And it's good that we came back to the FCTC there, because again, just to stress that this is a question of whether or not the Commission has lived up to the responsibilities it signed up to. Pascal, I sense you wish to say something.
Well, I have a... Can I show a slide?
Very quickly. Oh.
Yeah.
Has it worked?
Okay. Well, let me wear my civil society hat here. You know, this is what was obtained from the Commission as the result of a request for information. And I would say, you know, the way I look at it is as follows. If my wife learned that I was entertaining a correspondence with a lady of dubious reputation, and as proof of my innocence, the only element of my correspondence that I could exhibit was this, I think she would have every right to be mad with me. And not only that, but she would say, you are treating me like an idiot. And I think as civil society, when we get something like that, we feel humiliated. We feel treated like idiots. And we say, do they have something to hide? You know, it creates suspicion. It creates a very bad feeling. Then afterwards, it's difficult to get rid of. At this stage, you know, Europe is under attack. There are all kinds of movement. And we get this, those who want to trust the Commission, and this is bad. This is really a bad sign. And I think this needs to be corrected.
No, I'm not going to ask the gentleman to my right to defend the indefensible, but just out of interest, is there anybody in the audience who does want to defend this? No. Okay, there we are. I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Roberta? We need your microphone.
But I think, you know, I obviously can't comment on the letter because I haven't been able to read it either. but it is the case that very often the industry is asked to provide commercially sensitive information to the Commission, and that information, were it to get into the hands of another competing tobacco company, it would be unwelcome. And I suspect that's the reason why something should be redacted. I don't think there's any other reason other that it's a competitive issue or it's commercially sensitive. I don't know what.
But I think from a purely PR point of view, a freedom of information request from civil society which gets that in response is a bit of a rick, really. Bit of a PR disaster. That's my personal opinion. Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, you please.
My name is Anka Toma. I'm from the Smoke Free Partnership. First of all, thank you to the Ombudsman for this initiative and for doing the Lord's work on transparency and the implementation of the FCTC. Thank you also to the moderator for trying to keep the debate fact-focused. I think one of the tactics that we've encountered here today from the tobacco industry is to make it about arguments and debate, whereas it's about facts. The FCTC is a fact. The reasons for the FCTC are facts. And if we stick to the facts, then there's very little room for debate. That's one thing. My question is, we heard the evidence. There's plenty of information out there. There's plenty of evidence about past bad behavior, current bad behavior. There's also a very clear interpretation of the FCTC Article 5.3 from its own guidelines. Now a legal one, or an interpretation, a legal interpretation by the Ombudsman, and then there is a response by the European Commission that refutes that. My question is, what is missing between these facts and interpretations of the FCTC and concrete action? So I would like to ask the entire panel, if possible, to give an opinion of what they think needs to be actually done to get to a state where the FCTC is implemented satisfactorily.
Okay, Roberto, what needs to be done to get the FCTC implemented?
I think what is missing in some cases is simply political will, which is the lack of which is influenced by the tobacco industry lobbying on some politicians, on some parties, on some authorities. This is happening. And therefore, I mean, the tactic is always more or less the same: delay, postpone, argue, as you mentioned. And also, I fully agree with you. The discussion we had so far when the industry intervened was actually deviating from the actual facts. I mean, what should we discuss with an industry which kills half of its consumers? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what is the issue to discuss? The only issue to discuss is to try to avoid this industry to operate or to show us a plan for closing these activities and reconverting it in something more useful. So that's the only things we could discuss. So I think what we miss in many cases, particularly in the fragile countries, in the more fragile countries, for political reasons, for economic reasons, is the political will which is influenced by the pressures from the industry. So that's what I believe you should take into account.
Arunas?
Well, first of all, I would say that we have made a really big leap forward. 20 years ago, TPD directive would be a nonsense to talk about even. But what we are missing is a critical mass, and a critical mass, I say, in the whole society. Looking, first of all, what we have to do is that the convention should be applicable in member states. You need to ratify it. But take a simple example. You have a finance minister who has a ratification instrument in his hand, and he gets it on the table. Okay, I have a proposal to ratify this. And then you have, on the other hand, an offer from industry. I pay you this and give you a helicopter. I give you this and this. And where do I go? If I ratify, I am the number 6 or 7, so it will not come into force in some, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. What's the point? I need something for the tomorrow, a year or 2, and the industry provides me some instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, that can wait.
Instruments.
Yeah, the FCTC can wait. I'll go for the deal. And that goes on. So what we need is really to push member states, ratify it, and then we will get another momentum.
Okay. Yes, you wanted to add something.
Well, I've already said what I intend doing. I think political will is what comes into it. I mean, I think that the legal services of the Commissioner, whoever it was that drafted the response to my recommendation, I understand it was the legal services at least, to advise the Commission in relation to that, or some of the Commission. I think it would not have been too difficult for them equally to come up with a legal opinion that supported my own. I don't know why the Commission or some parts of the Commission chose to do what they did and reject the recommendation. I think they have time now. I will be obviously formally responding to their response. And I think I would ask the Commission to listen to the voices that have supported my recommendation, and perhaps to reflect on what they've done, because, as I said in my earlier intervention, I don't know what they thought they were going to lose, particularly in accepting what I was recommending, given that under 1049, leaving aside that wonderful slide, a lot of information does come out. Could I just say something to Ronan as well? I mean, obviously, I hear the point you're making about the voice of the industry, and the tobacco industry is still very powerful and very important. In fact, just the last couple of days, I've read 2 pieces, I think both of them in the Financial Times, one talking about the degree to which the stocks of the cigarette industry, the tobacco industry, have gone shooting up since 2000. And the other one was about the dilemmas currently faced by big pension companies around the world who see the value of the stocks and who have opted for ethical or other reasons not to buy cigarette stocks, and now they may be coming under pressure to do that. So all of those are issues that governments and regulators and various people have to deal with. But I don't think there's anybody in this room who honestly believes that you guys cannot get your point of view across if you choose to and if you want to. And I mean, you've been able to do it here, for example, even though I did not invite you to be on the panel as such. Again, I was reading in the last couple of days certain transparency, or as I still like to call them, FOI requests that came out in relation to certain meetings that some parts of the tobacco industry had with the Commission relatively recently. And I think the issue that was being discussed was about, I think the meeting was requested to talk about better regulation, and then when it drilled down, it was about how the warning sign or the health warning sign should wrap itself around the beveled edges of the cigarette pack. So it was very detailed, and that suggests to me that you can discuss these matters with. Now, you may have a different view, but I given how successful you've been in other areas, and indeed in generally the industry itself, I doubt that it would be a major problem for you to get your essential points across. And of course, it would be bad governance or bad administration if they didn't listen to the essential points of what was needed to hear from the industry. But that's exactly what the convention says, to limit those interactions only to what are strictly necessary. But of course, there will be different views as to what strictly necessary means.
Okay. Pascal.
Well, I just what we need. Actually, if you look at the history of the tobacco control movement, it really took off in late 80s in California, and this was linked to a specific event, which was Proposition 99, which decided that 25 cents would be taken on each cigarette pack and dedicated to tobacco control. And this made the whole difference. This started a whole movement of which today our degree of awareness comes from that. So I would say money is an issue, and of course money is linked to political will. And tobacco control is, at the national level, an issue which is chronically underfunded in an area where there's a lot of money. And I think this is incredible that states get a lot of money from smoking and dedicate extremely little to tobacco control, while we know, like a lot of preventative measures, this is a measure where the return on investment is 20, even 40 times. You spend €1 in tobacco control, the return is 20 or 40 euros saved in all areas. So I think that we should kind of break this barrier of underfunding this activity, and we don't need a lot of money, really. It's something that you don't need a lot of money to have effective legislation.
Would you have anything to sort of add to that? I mean, about the impact of the on healthcare costs, perhaps, that Pascal hinted to?
Well, I think that's pretty obvious. We don't need to elaborate. Big data, and everybody quotes these 700,000 people dying every year. So the costs are obvious, and but it's not the point. The point is very simple. This is the only product which directly kills.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Roberto, but at the end of the day, is this lobbying, you've said you've experienced it, is it really so strong that it can change policy?
I think, yes, they still are very strong. I mean, what was mentioned by Arunas is actually quite significant. This might not happen in all countries. It may happen in, I'm not talking about Europe only, I'm talking about at the global level, because we are facing an epidemic at the global level. So we have also, as WHO, we have to look beyond the European borders. And those issues that you mentioned happen, and happen constantly. The economic power of the tobacco industry is huge. It's much more than the GDP of some small countries. So I think that this is something that it's not possible to contrast only with goodwill. So we have put together this convention just to give a legal value to the activities of the movement against tobacco consumption. And we are getting some results, but still the prevalence of use of tobacco in many European countries and across the world is too high, is by far too high. In many countries, it's beyond 20% of the population. It's increasing among young people. There are tactics which have been used to attract the interest of young women and young boys as well, through in very sophisticated marketing techniques in places where the children and the young people gather, or using social media. So there are extreme sophisticated tactics. And I think the power of the lobby, with all the funding that they have available, can really be very difficult to contrast. So I believe that this is a battle which we have not won yet. There are some there have been meetings recently which were mentioning the end game of tobacco. I think these meetings were very welcome, but a bit too optimistic in my view. Even the objectives which have been set up for 2025 will not be easy to achieve in terms of prevention of non-communicable disease. So this is an open ground for advocacy, public health action, and I think we need to underline this, because there is a perception sometimes, also within the public health community, that this is an issue which has been sorted out. It's solved. I mean, we have the instruments, we have the knowledge, we have everything, which is not true, because at the same time we see the increase of tobacco consumption in some countries. And so therefore, I mean, I think I just would like to conclude, with, first of all, thanking the Ombudsman for this meeting. Also, I think the action you have taken is extremely important. I really would like to thank you on behalf of WHO and also of the public health community for having done this, because this debate is relevant, is very relevant. And I think we have to make sure that you will get to the to a positive feedback from the next stage of the action. And I think what I would like to conclude by saying that the battle is not over. We have to implement fully the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, and we have to advance in the control of this epidemic sooner than later, because you mentioned the funding that we need. The amount of cases of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and other things which are caused by tobacco is huge. It's a huge cost. I made a simple calculation some days ago for, referring to my own country, and if the tobacco cigarettes were increased of €1 per each pack, and this money was used entirely to compensate the cost of the health system, still there was an increase in the revenues for the taxation because of the not immediate impact of this policy in the decrease in the prevalence of tobacco smoking. So there is a lot we can do, a lot we know we can do, and so I think I would like simply to ask all of you to help us, help the public health community to undertake all the necessary action against this unacceptable epidemic.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. And I think it's worth remembering that in the last commission, tobacco lobbying did claim the scalp of a commissioner. Yes, please go ahead, and we'll come to you afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
My name is Catherine Hartman, and I'm a public health advocate, and I work for the European COPD Coalition, COPD being a deadly respiratory disease. I'm speaking in my own name right now, but I'm speaking to the gentleman here. I think his complaint is quite obscene. These people say they don't have the voice and they cannot access, they are not treated fairly. I'm sorry, the people who died from cancer, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, and in particular COPD, do not have a voice ever again. They're simply dead, because the product you sell killed them. So they have no voice either, and I'm way more sorry for them than I would be for you. That's my first remark. Second remark is, if you cannot access people verbally, like you're not allowed to go into the panel, surely you do it in writing, and surely intelligent people take some time to read. So this argument is not a good argument. Thirdly, if we're promoting transparency here in tobacco lobbying, why don't you display your tactics when they're not commercially sensitive? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those questions. I mean, just to say, it sort of cuts both ways on this. Let's try and keep this on the FCTC. But thank you for your comments. Yes, you had something to say.
Okay. My name is Carlotta De Mofonti. Actually, I'm working for the oil and gas industry, so I'm here just because I'm fascinated by the issue, because I've written my dissertation on it, so on tobacco lobbying. And the thing is that I arrive on the conclusion, and I am on the side of the manufacturing industry, because it's like, up to me, I start my study from the definition of lobbying and lobbyist. So if you had in mind this type of definition, it's like why the article, so the 5.3, has to prevent from a contact between a lobbyist and the political side. And the second question, then the second comment is that until maybe this type of business is legal, it's like everybody, also the lobbyists who come from this type of business has to preserve their job and the industry for their works too. And I'm sorry that the commissioner is not here, but maybe they didn't receive a lot of requests of meeting, not for the policy, but maybe because they know that nobody wants to meet them. This is just a reflection. And the last one is that a lot of tobacco industry are working for products less harmful products. Is that if there is no dialogue, how can they improve their research or, I don't know, this type of.
Okay, I think I'll take, there was one part of that in particular which I found interesting, which was how can we actually define a lobbyist? What makes a lobbyist? Because I don't know, I've been working in Brussels for 4 or 5 years, and occasionally it's used as an insult, and occasionally it's used as a sort of a grudging compliment. So, can you define a lobbyist?
I would avoid going into a debate about definition, because we may spend the rest of the day or the rest of the month. I remember at WHO, they had organized a meeting a long time ago on urban ecology, and they spent the whole meeting discussing the difference between rural and urban, and ended with nothing. So, but one thing I would say is that a lobbyist is clearly somebody who defends a particular private interest. And sometimes the tobacco industry refers to public health as public health lobbyist. And I think this is wrong. This is a contradiction. If you defend public interest, you're not a lobbyist. You're somebody who defends public interest. And this is at least the distinction I would make, rather than going into a debate about the exact definition. And probably it's good to, like all terms in our language, to give them a certain flexibility in their interpretation.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got time for one last quick question. Yes, you sir with the glasses, please introduce yourself and press the green button.
Hiya. Is this on? Hiya. Hi everybody, thank you very much indeed. My name's Oliver Bartlett and I'm here from the University of Liverpool, also representing the Law in Non-Communicable Disease Research Unit there. My question actually kind of follows on a little bit from what was just said, and it is to invite the panel to elaborate on a comment that was made earlier about the involvement of law and lawyers in this whole process, because I think it's useful to bring this debate back to the fact that ultimately this is a matter of law as well as good governance. At the end of the day, what comes out is the Tobacco Products Directive. It's law and a number of legal aspects, like there's a legal obligation under 5.3, Article 168(1) of the TFEU, a legal obligation to consider health policies in all aspects of work. So the question of transparency is also a legal one as well. And I've been thinking about this over the course of the very interesting seminar. So I'd like to invite the panel to elaborate, as I say, further on what should the role of law, and in particular of lawyers, be in helping everyone to understand the legal issues inherent in this debate as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I think it also sort of speaks to what the Ombudsman said about legal opinions, and maybe they could have just as easily have come up with a different legal opinion. Can a legal opinion be politically influenced? Roberto.
Well, I'm not an expert in legal matters, but I think that sometimes there are a number of interpretations that the lawyers make of the same text. So I'm not surprised if there is a different interpretation of the legal things. But in this particular case, I think the legal obligation is so crystal clear. I mean, if you read the 5.3, I mean, I don't think there are rooms for misinterpretation. So I think this is really very clear. Even also the TPD is quite clear. So of course there are attempts to make interpretation, like in the case which was mentioned before of the labeling of the cigarette packs, which through other legislation you can argue on some issues. But I strongly believe that we are facing a clear-cut text that only needs to be implemented, and countries have committed to do so. So I think this is a political decision. The text is there. I don't see much room for interpretation on the legal value.
Pascal, can lawyers be influenced by lobbyists?
Well, yes, they can be influenced by lobbyists when they are not themselves lobbyists. I'm talking about the lawyers of the tobacco industry. In fact, what has happened, this is what they are lawyers that Tobacco industry has been recognized, I mean, in judgment, that their lawyers went beyond what is strictly legal advice and became stakeholders in the issue. I mean, for example, there were in the United States fraudulent behavior done by the industry, but this fraudulent behavior was actually conducted by the lawyers, and the industry thought that they were protected by professional secrecy and things like that.
I'm going to have to just cut you short because we are coming to the end, but thank you for that. I mean, you know, I think, but we're talking really about perhaps, you know, lawyers within the institutions. I mean, do they need to be protected from lobbyists?
You are killing me with questions.
I'd say possibly.
Yeah, but I told you in small chit chat, but there's 3 lawyers, 5 opinions. So
I think that's a very good answer. Yes.
Well, I think in most any good transparency laws, there is one protection afforded to lawyer-client privilege, but that tends to be in relation to litigation. I mean, if you have a problem, you call in a lawyer, then you have the right to privilege in relation to that. I'll just finish what I'm going to say. So the point that I was making and the recommendation I made was that the Commission and other institutions should recognise that lawyers, when they're employed by PR firms or lobby firms or whatever, are not necessarily acting in that space, but they are acting as lobbyists. And therefore, when lawyers go in to the various DGs and suggest a way to amend or to whatever, create a particular regulation in the interests of their client, then they are acting as lobbyists. And then the same transparency rules that apply to non-lawyer lobbyists should also apply to those.
Okay, very quickly.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you very much. Just to clarify, I'm a public health lawyer, as are all my colleagues as well. So, like, we fully support and are fighting for everything that Roberto has said, what the lady over there has said as well. So, I just like to clarify that, you know, I really, your comments are really, really interesting as well, but just to specify that, you know, I come from this from the standpoint of a public health lawyer who is interested in how, you know, things like the international right to health, those sort of legal imperatives impact.
You've made that clear, and thank you for that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end. Before I hand back over to the Ombudsman, there's a couple of things I'd like to say and 2 questions I would like to ask you with the infamous show of hands. Everybody loves audience participation. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, does tobacco lobbying need improving? Or does the handling of tobacco lobbying need improving? Put your hands up if you think the answer is yes. Okay, I would say that's a slight majority. Oh, no, it's a majority. It's a majority. And the slightly more mischievous question, does the Commission live up to its FCTC obligations under Article 5 of the... I've forgotten the name of the convention now. I'm demob happy. So who thinks the Commission is doing what they should on this, with the notable exception of DG Health? Hands up who thinks the Commission's doing what they should? Two hands. So a message there for a Commission which has named making the EU more accountable as one of its political priorities.
Everybody else abstained.
Everyone else abstained. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to thank our fantastic panelists very quickly now. I would like to thank you all for your questions and your interaction, which is very much appreciated. We couldn't have done it without you. And I would also like to hand over now to the Ombudsman to close this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you, everybody, for paying such rapt attention over the last while. I'd like to really thank our guests that came here to speak, particularly those who were asked at rather short notice, and also to thank the Commissioner. And I'd like to thank them for the care in which they processed what I was trying to do and brought their own particular point of view to it. I think the tobacco industry did get an opportunity to say what they needed to say, just in relation to my own interest, and that is in having this, what I consider to be a very important recommendation, got across the line, that the Commission accepts what I recommended. I can't all the time work just on my own, with my own resources. Sometimes I need a coalition of forces and allies to help this across the line. I think I have that. I've seen that over the last few months, and I would ask those of you who are in a position to lend your voices to this recommendation, and if you have an opportunity to lobby the Commission in relation to this, then please do so, and hopefully we will get it across the line, because I think, and I think the Commissioner said, I think this Commission has done a lot of work in relation to transparency, and I think it does put a high value on public health. So I think it just needs a little more effort and reflection on its part to get this across the line. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.